that, but we'll be set up in just a second. All right, we are officially live on YouTube. I'm gonna go ahead and put the link in the chat because I would say that's the #1 question I get during these events. Will this recording be available afterward? Not only will it be available afterward, it'll be available during as a YouTube live stream. So everyone, we're so glad to have you here. We're gonna give everyone a minute to authenticate in to make sure all of our Zoom registrants can make it. And for those of you who might be tuning in from YouTube, don't worry, we're not ignoring you. We'll be monitoring the YouTube comments periodically and make sure we're addressing your questions as well. So as an FYI, this event is recorded. That being said, we don't want you to refrain from communicating with us in the chat. We really want to be responsive to your questions and your thoughts, any epiphanies you might have throughout this presentation. So don't be shy about those. And if you want to chat with your fellow attendees in the chat, make sure you select all panelists and attendees so everybody can see your message. That being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know we have a jam-packed schedule today. My name is Caroline Nickerson, and I'm on the SciStarter team. I'm so delighted to be here with you today, to be learning with you. I'm personally really curious about Cochrane crowd, so I think it's going to be a blast. I'm going to go ahead and start presenting. So one reason we're here is it's Citizen Science Month. We are on the home stretch. Every day in April, there have been multiple featured citizen science projects. There have been events from all over the world, especially in public libraries in the United States. People have been meeting online. They've been doing citizen science wherever they happen to be, wherever their community is, whoever they are, whatever background they have, they've been meaningfully involved in scientific research. And one disclaimer I always like to include at the beginning of these is the fun doesn't have to end in April. We're going to keep on doing citizen science every single day of the year at SciStarter. You can find a way to be meaningfully involved in scientific research. I wanted to thank the network of the National Library of Medicine and the All of Us Research Program. Without their support, the Citizen Science Month activities that you've been enjoying all month wouldn't have been possible. I always like to pause here as well and say what I mean by citizen science. So at SciStarter, we think of citizen science as a collaboration between researchers and scientists and those of us who are curious, concerned, and motivated to make a difference. Basically, you're doing citizen science whenever you move science forward in some way. Most often, you do citizen science by collecting or analyzing data for an ongoing research project. And you can discover those research projects on SciStarter. SciStarter connects citizen scientists from all over the world to over 3,000 projects, events, and tools that folks have added for you to discover. So if you're curious about astronomy, you can find a way to do real scientific research about astronomy on SciStarter. If you're curious about biodiversity, you really want to understand plants and animals in your community, you can study that through a citizen science project that you can discover on SciStarter. If you want to delve into health a little bit more and you're really curious about healthcare and how our bodies work, there are projects for that too. If there's a science for something, there's a way that you can be meaningfully involved as a citizen scientist. And we fully recognize that this can be a little overwhelming, the fact that you have thousands of different options to search through, which is why I love doing events like these with the Cochrane crowd folks and with other featured projects, because it gives you one clear way, one clear call to action to get started. You can do a citizen science project today. I hope that you make that project Cochrane Crowd. So we mentioned that Citizen Science Month wouldn't have been possible without the network of the National Library of Medicine, the All of Us Research Program. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to be directing you to this particular URL on your screen, scistarter.org/NLM. That stands for National Library of Medicine. Cochrane Crowd is listed right at the top, so you can get started there. And there are other featured citizen science projects like I See Change, which asks people to document environmental hazards that they observe in their community, or the Stall Catchers Project that invites folks from all over the world to play an online game to accelerate the search for a cure to Alzheimer's disease. The Globe at Night Project, which invites citizen scientists to look up at the night sky, indicate what stars they're able to see to contribute to a study of light pollution, which has, big impacts not only for human health, our circadian rhythms and how we sleep, but also for ecosystem health, animal migration, and things like that. We're also really grateful to the network of the National Library of Medicine for their help in increasing diversity and participation and providing instructional materials like that, an open source online tutorial in English and Spanish that you'll find on this page. So I know that a lot of public libraries, schools, individuals, just folks who really want to make a difference have been using this page, and it is available as a resource for you. And it'll be here throughout the presentation and throughout the rest of the year. It's not going away after Citizen Science Month. I wanted to say a few quick words about the All of Us research program. If you want to learn more about it in depth, we actually have an event later today with All of Us California. But the All of Us research program is a precision medicine study. It's a very exciting initiative, and it's one I really love learning about. I'm excited for the event later today. But basically, precision medicine, it's an emerging approach for disease treatment and prevention that takes into account individual variability in lifestyle, socioeconomics, environment, and biology. So in other words, it's a radical shift in how each of us can receive the best care possible based on our unique makeup. And I love these examples of precision medicine because I think it really hammers it home for folks, like glasses. If Anna wanted to use my glasses, she probably wouldn't be able to see out of them because they've been used just for my eyes. They've been customized just for my eyes. Precision medicine basically wants to take these principles, these examples you see on your screen, and apply it to the rest of healthcare, which I think is really cool. And if you want to learn more about the All of Us research program, how you can participate either by filling out surveys or potentially contributing samples and signing up to be part of the study, you can come to the event later today. You could read this blog post on the SciStarter blog about how 1 million volunteers in the USA could one day revolutionize medicine. Or you can go to this link, joinallofus.org/NLM. And you can also find your way to this link at scistarter.org/NLM. So if you only have the capacity to remember one link today, remember scistarter.org/NLM, because you can find the Join All of Us link from there. And you can also find your way to Cochrane Crowd. It's right at the top of that page as well. That being said, I'm going to stop sharing at this point to hand the mic over to Anna and Richard. They're our special guests today. They're going to tell us about the featured project and talk to us about how we can get started with this exciting healthcare project. So Anna and Richard, take it away.
Thank you. That's great. Right, let me see if I can share my screen. And right, hopefully you can just about see my slides. Richard, can you confirm you can see them okay?
Yep.
Nice and clear.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Okay. So yeah, hello, and thanks very much, Caroline. It's really great to be here to do this webinar, which we've called Citizen Science and the COVID-19 Infodemic, the Fight Against Misinformation. So I'm Anna Knowles-Storr. I work for an organisation, a healthcare organisation called Cochrane, which you'll hear quite a lot more about later. I'm an information specialist by background, so AKA librarian, and I'm based at Oxford in the UK. But I also lead on Cochrane's Citizen Science initiative, which is called Cochrane Crowd. And again, you will hear more about that later as well. So I'm joined today by my colleague, Richard Morley. Richard, if you'd like to just introduce yourself.
Thanks, Anna. Hi everyone. It's a real privilege to be with you today. And yeah, I also work for Cochrane's central organisation. I'm based in York in the UK, but I work globally. And it's my privilege to work with patients, caregivers, the public on issues related to health evidence. And amongst those things, I support people who, very much in the spirit of what we're talking about today, who help contribute as ordinary people to producing Cochrane's evidence. And I work with the scientists of Cochrane who want to help that happen. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later and other things. So I'll hand you back to Anna.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Richard. So before we get going, I just want to briefly outline the structure of this webinar. We're going to start off by thinking about where we get our health-related information from, before looking more specifically at health information during the COVID pandemic. And then we'll move into looking specifically at some new resources that are available, designed to introduce people to health research and how to judge whether a claim is reliable or not. And we'll, of course, talk a bit about Cochrane Crowd and how you can actively start contributing today. So I don't want this to just be myself and Richard talking at you for an hour. Along the way, we're going to run a few polls here in Zoom, and we're also going to use an application called Menti, but I'll explain more about that when we get there. Hopefully we will have time for a little bit of Q&A at the end. So as Caroline said, if you have some questions, pop them in the chat box and we'll try and get to those at the end. Right, well, I think that's enough housekeeping. Let's kick off. And Caroline, if we can launch the first poll, that would be great. The question is, where do you get your health information from? And your options are social media, TV advertisements, friends and family, medical professionals, news sites or newspapers, general internet search, or a combination of all of those things. So if you can think
and if you're
about
watching
that.
YouTube, let us know your answer to this in the comments.
Yep. So we'll just give it a couple more. All right, do you think we've got some answers coming in yet?
The votes are still pouring in. Get your I'll give you all
what we're gonna get.
3 more seconds to vote, everybody. So 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll.
Let's have a little look at that. Okay, so perhaps not terribly surprising, we've got out there general internet search as our most popular method. Yeah, news sites, newspapers, medical professionals, bit of a mix of some of those things. So a little bit of everything really, which perhaps isn't terribly surprising. Okay, let's move on. Close that one. And seeing as that was so much fun, we will immediately dive into poll number 2, which is a very similar question, but not quite the same. And it's around, where do you start, or where do you go to first when you think you might have a health problem or a health concern? And obviously, perhaps I'm not talking about something like a heart attack, but something sort of more minor than that. Where would you go? Talk to family, friends, medical professionals, general internet search. Do you have a specific health website you might go to, social media or other? Okay, how are we looking there, Caroline?
I see a few more votes pouring in, so we'll give you a few more seconds.
Great.
All right, 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll.
Okay, so excellent. We have quite even across the top 4 really, which is what I expected. Yeah, interesting to see specific health websites there. I think that's very encouraging. General internet search, not surprising, medical professionals, and talk to family and friends. And there isn't a particular right or wrong answer. You know, we all do get our health information from various places. Okay, let's close that for now and move on. So for me, if I'm being completely honest, in almost all cases, I go straight to Google and I type in what I think is a reasonable description of my symptoms, and then I dive into those top results. And I'm clearly not the only one who does take this approach, because whenever I type something in, a whole load of very similar queries will pop up. And it's quite a satisfying way, quite a satisfying thing to do, because there are always results. You know, I could even put in something really specific, like my hands turn blue every Tuesday, and I would probably still get some results coming up. And often, actually, there's an overwhelming number of results, and I can find myself whiling away many hours clicking through them, probably coming up with several different diagnoses. And I realize then that I've entered a bit of an echo chamber, or I've sort of come across recently termed the Woozle Effect. And so this is really where Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, they set off in search of a woozle, and they end up following their own footprints round and round in circles. And they see more and more footprints, and they take this as stronger and stronger evidence that they're getting closer and closer to this woozle that they're hunting. And of course they're not. What they're doing is following their own footprints round and round. And we have a slightly more formal term for this in sort of health research circles in Cochrane, which we call confirmation bias. And I came across my own confirmation bias. Well, I seem to come across it actually anytime we have any big major election here in the UK. So for the last 2 general elections and for the big referendum we had on the EU, not being a huge social media fan, I did follow these events fairly avidly on Twitter. And I have to say, I called it wrong every time. And that's because I surrounded myself with like-minded thinkers, organizations and people whose thinking and beliefs were so aligned to my own that I kind of believed that the outcome would go the way that I expected it to go. Now, of course, the COVID pandemic has impacted all of us. So we're going to now try using Menti. What we're going to do here is try to generate a word cloud. And what I want you to do is think of up to 3 words or short phrases that come to mind when you think about how the pandemic makes you feel. So I will just come out of my slide deck. What you have to do is you don't have to leave the webinar. Just either go to menti.com on another browser tab or use your mobile device and enter in this code, which is 65278451. And hopefully you'll then see some questions around how the pandemic made you feel. And we can start to see that word cloud coming along nicely. And as expected, we're seeing some pretty negative words there. Anxious, uncertain, introverted, scared, frightened, isolated. Yeah. It has been an incredibly unsettling time for everybody. And that's the first time I've used Menti, and I have to say, I think that's really good. I think that's a really nice thing. I recommend that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slide deck now. And hopefully I'm still sharing my screen okay. I'm sure someone will shout if I'm not. Brilliant. So whenever there is an epidemic or a pandemic, there is a corresponding infodemic. And the World Health Organization defines an infodemic as an infodemic is too much information, including false or misleading information in digital and physical environments during a disease outbreak. It causes confusion and risk-taking behaviors that can harm health. It also leads to mistrust in health authorities and undermines the public health response. An infodemic can intensify or lengthen outbreaks when people are unsure about what they need to do to protect their health and the health of people around them. So for me, what really strikes me here is that an infodemic can have a direct impact on the pandemic. As we see here, it can intensify or lengthen it. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information, regardless of the intent to mislead. It differs slightly from disinformation, which is considered to be more the deliberate spread of false or inaccurate information. And there are so many ways in which information can be made available. And wow, can it spread quickly. So my daughters have been learning about the power of social media and social networking at school. And one example they came home with was this WhatsApp example. So where a WhatsApp message is shared with 20 people, who then share it with 20 more people. And you do this to 5 degrees of sharing, and suddenly the message has been shared with over 3 million people. So misinformation and disinformation about COVID-19 has been prolific, from theories about what caused it, such as 5G, and spoiler alert, 5G does not cause COVID-19, to theories about how to prevent it and how to treat it. And some are harmless ideas, perhaps, and some are maybe wishful thinking. And again, spoiler alert, drinking alcohol does not prevent COVID-19, but some are downright harmful. Okay, let's do another poll. So Caroline, if you can launch poll number 3, which is around which one of these is a COVID-19 myth. We've got sunlight neutralizes the virus. A sip of warm water every 20 minutes will prevent you from catching COVID-19. COVID is transmitted through mosquitoes. Children can't get COVID-19. Drinking alcohol can help prevent COVID-19. Spraying chlorine on your body can kill the virus inside it. Eating garlic can prevent COVID-19. Or are all of these COVID-19 myths?
Looks like pretty much everybody has voted. I'll give you all a few more seconds. And I see we have some YouTube viewers, so let us know your thoughts in the comments. But 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll.
All right, so the very vast majority have indeed, spotted that these are all COVID-19 myths that have done the rounds in the last 12 months. Okay, so we will close that one. Sometimes a health claim is made with such confidence, perhaps in the form of a newspaper headline, that we can sort of assume that the headline is justified, that it's based on good research. But the reality is that if it sounds too good to be true, I'm afraid it probably is. We often have to make decisions about our health and our healthcare based on what information is available. So we need to be able to judge whether that information is reliable. And we need to know what the evidence is. So I'm now going to hand you over to Richard, who is going to take you through what evidence is and what Cochrane does. So let me stop sharing my screen a moment.
Okay, so I'm hoping that you can now see my slides.
Yep.
Yep, thanks, Anna. So, hi, yes, I'm Richard Morley, and I'm just going to talk a little bit now about health evidence. We've been discussing, where we find it, who we ask. We've been talking about mis and disinformation, about certainty and uncertainty. So I'm going to talk a little bit about evidence-based medicine as an idea, and perhaps how, in an ideal world, we might make decisions about our healthcare. So on the screen, you should be able to see 3 interlocking circles, a Venn diagram, which describes evidence-based medicine, the principle of evidence-based medicine. So this was first articulated by Sackett and others in 1996. And they talked about 3 things that come together to make evidence-based medicine. And you'll probably recognize these things, from your conversations, perhaps with your healthcare professionals. So the first thing might be about clinical judgment. So that's about what your healthcare practitioner has gathered, the knowledge, that your healthcare practitioner has gathered through training or then their experience as a practitioner. So that's one part of evidence-based medicine. Another would be about your personal values and preferences as a patient. So what's important to you? You know, what things do you look for when you're thinking about your own health? And then the third part of this Venn diagram is about scientific evidence. So what does the evidence say about what works, what possible harms there might be for any treatment? So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the scientific evidence, because that's what we've been talking a little bit already about today, about the science. So we talked about where do people get their evidence. Evidence comes from in many forms. Scientists talk about the hierarchy of evidence, and this pyramid that you can see here represents a hierarchy of evidence. And so if you think about where you might get your evidence, right at the bottom of the triangle there, of the pyramid, is expert opinion. So it may be that you would look at the people who have opinions about health evidence, and you would talk to them, and you get your information from them. And there's a lot of expert or so-called expert opinion around. How do you use that? How do you select from that about what's right? But as you go up the pyramid, you can see that there are all kinds of different ways of gathering evidence, from case reports, case studies, to observational studies, following people as they go through their lives and their experience of health and ill health, right up to near the top, randomized controlled trials, which are a form of scientific experiment, and then up to the very top of that, which is a systematic review. So scientists often regard systematic reviews as the very top of the hierarchy of evidence. So that brings us on to Cochrane and to Archie Cochran. So Archie Cochran is a little bit of a hero of mine. He's a fascinating character to learn more about. In many ways, he's regarded as the father of modern evidence-based medicine. His most famous book is Effectiveness and Efficiency: Random Reflections on Health Services from 1972. And he made a strong argument for the use of clinical trials to make decisions about healthcare more effective and efficient. And the other thing, he talked about evidence synthesis, systematic reviews, which we talked about at the top of that pyramid. And he pointed out how it was actually a criticism of the healthcare profession at that time, that there wasn't at that time any kind of critical summary of all the randomized controlled trials. So there were lots of controlled randomized trials taking place around the world, but there was nowhere to put all that information together and to make sense of it. So that's what Cochrane does. If you're wondering who we are and what Cochrane does, this is a quote from The Guardian newspaper in the UK from 2016. And I think this sums up pretty neatly what Cochrane does. It summarizes the findings so that people making important decisions, you, your doctor, the people who write medical guidelines, can use unbiased information to make difficult choices without having to read every study out there. Now, you can find out more information about Cochrane on their website at cochrane.org, and all of their evidence that they produce, so these systematic reviews that we've been talking about, can be found on the Cochrane Library as well. Now, you'll have perhaps seen on our slides the Cochrane logo at the top. I just wanted to say a little bit about what that means, because it kind of sums up Cochrane evidence here. So this is the Cochrane logo. And so the way we think about it in Cochrane is that the outsides of the circle, so the two C's, one in the normal way and one reversed. They represent our global collaboration. Cochrane's a global partnership of over 105,000 people around the world, a staggering number of people, and yet often an organisation that no one's heard about. And this logo is also something else. It's a forest plot, which is its name, or it's also known as a blobogram, and I love that name, much better than a forest plot. And it's a way of graphically representing, summarising systematic reviews, and I'll explain more about how you can find out what that means soon. But this is from this particular forest plot or blobogram, sums up the evidence from a systematic review, a really important systematic review that Cochrane undertook many years ago, which was about how, what the evidence said. It summed up the evidence from clinical trials about the effectiveness of corticosteroids given to women who are about to give birth prematurely. And if you took those, what would be the effect on the life of the newborn child? This was such an important review, and it led to the change in treatments for women at risk of premature birth and babies at risk. And it's saved, that review, that systematic review, that Cochrane review, has probably saved thousands of lives. And that's why we use this as a symbol for Cochrane. Now, if this has at all whetted your appetite to find out more about evidence, clinical trials, about Cochrane and systematic reviews, I can talk a little bit, just very briefly, introduce our evidence essentials. This is free online learning for you as a member of the public. It's been jointly written by members of the public along with scientists from Cochrane as well, which explains all about the kinds of things that I've been talking about earlier. It's told by Eleni, who's a fictitious healthcare consumer, a patient, and she takes you through her journey as she uncovers these things about evidence-based medicine, which we've talked a little bit about now, about clinical trials, about systematic reviews, and how to use that evidence as part of shared decision making. So it's freely available. There's 3 hours of learning. Since it was launched last year, we've had 17,000 people who've accessed it, and it's currently available in German. Soon it'll be published in Russian. There are 4 modules currently. The first one, Eleni tells us all about how she discovers evidence-based medicine, its history, people and ideas, like some of the things we've been talking about earlier. So that's an introduction to evidence-based medicine. The second module is about randomized controlled trials. So it goes into some detail about what a clinical trial is, how they're designed, how they're run, and how to recognize a good clinical trial and a poorly designed trial. And module 3 introduces people, Eleni introduces people to systematic reviews, how they're conducted and why they're important. And then in module 4, it's about how to find those reviews, how to understand them, and how to use them when you're making your healthcare decisions. So there's the link. It's found on our Cochrane training website. It's free with a Cochrane account. It's really interactive and I hope interesting and fun to take part in. So that's it from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand over back to Anna.
Thanks very much, Richard. Right, let me reshare. So Richard's talked a bit about one fantastic resource available in Cochrane called Evidence Essentials. I'm now going to talk about another resource that we have available on our Cochrane Crowd platform, which is an introduction to study designs for complete beginners. So if you really are completely new to the area of health research, this might be a good place to start. What we've done is we've created 7 what we call micro training modules. You have to do them in order, and they get sort of progressively slightly more complex as you progress through them. And let me just move on to sort of prove that they really only do take 5 to 10 minutes to complete. They really are micro in nature. We're going to go through the first one together. I'm just going to move this up. There we go. So this is the first screen of the first module. We're going to learn about different study designs used in health research. But first, what is a study? A study is an investigation into something in order to understand it better. It almost always involves collecting information or data and analyzing it. Research studies come in lots of different shapes and sizes. These different shapes and sizes can be thought of as different ways a study can be designed, and the most appropriate study design will depend on the aim of the research. So here we have 3 sort of researchers, if you like. I want to test a new treatment for people with memory problems. I want to know if more people eat more chocolate during the winter months. Very important question. I want to evaluate this new heart monitor to see if it can detect heart problems. And each of these aims would need a different study design in order to be able to answer the question. But why is it important to know about different study designs? Well, understanding about different study designs will give you the power to determine whether an appropriate design was used and if the conclusions of the study are valid. We often come across dramatic headlines in the news about new scientific breakthroughs. And behind each headline is a study. But does the study and its findings justify the headline? We can only begin to answer that question when armed with some knowledge about different study designs. And I'll just say that throughout these modules, you'll come across some wonderful puns. There we go. Cancer, Curie, and rice. Often the study will not justify the headline. And that does not mean necessarily that the study was bad. It's more likely the headline is sensationalizing the study. All study designs have good points and bad points about them. Some studies might involve a very large number of participants. That's usually thought of as a good thing, but can be very expensive to set up and run. That's usually thought of as not such a good thing. And so that was the first learning part of module 1. And then the second half is made up of 5 questions where you sort of test your learning. So which of these is not a study? And it's given you a hint there that there are 2. You've got A, making a spreadsheet to record how much time I spend practicing my guitar. B, following a recipe for brownies. C, measuring the daily rainfall in October this year and comparing it with last year. D, recording my 5K weekly run time with my new trainers and comparing my time when wearing my old trainers. So A and B are the two things here that are not a study. So simply recording some data isn't enough quite to qualify it as a study. There has to be a purpose or a hypothesis and some sort of analysis with that data. The same for the brownie recipe. Excuse me a moment. Following a list some instructions doesn't qualify as a study. But also just to point out that a study doesn't just have to be health related. We can do all sorts of studies that we, do in our daily lives, such as comparing my trainers, my old trainers and my new trainers, or measuring environmental things like rainfall. Question number 2. Which of these statements is true? All studies should follow the same design to be consistent. B. The appropriate study design will depend on the question or aim of the research. C. Study designs are always excellently reported in the media. So I think we know that the correct answer is B here. The appropriate study design will depend on the question that you're trying to find an answer for. Question number 3. Sam reads an encouraging headline in the paper. New drug boosts IQ by 25%. Sam should A, dismiss the headline as nonsense, B, rush to the pharmacy to buy some brain boost juice, or C, try to find out more about the study that has produced this dramatic sounding headline. So hopefully you're thinking the answer is C. You should probably find out a little bit more about the study that's produced the headline, see whether or not it's valid. And question 4. Understanding different study designs is useful because A, it will give you something to talk about at dinner parties. B, it will help you determine whether health and other claims are valid or not. And so really the answer is both A and B, because it will give you something to talk about at dinner parties. But what we're really getting at here is that it will help you determine whether claims that you might come across in the media are valid or not. And as I say, this extends beyond health, in fact. And question 5, a study is collecting data or information about something, reading a great deal about a topic, C, an investigation and analysis into something, or D, something only done by researchers. And so the answer is C, it's an investigation and analysis into something. A study doesn't have to just be done by researchers. Anyone can do a study. I know my daughter did an experiment on whether or not eating cheese before bed would give her bad dreams. It wasn't a very well-conducted study, but it was a study. And so that is the end of module 1 of those 7 micro-training modules which we've put together. And you can access the micro-training modules on Cochrane Crowd, which I'm going to talk a bit about now. So these and other micro-training modules are available on our citizen science platform, which is called Cochrane Crowd. It also offers a range of citizen science tasks that you can dive into, all of which are about helping to identify and describe health research. Each task is supported by interactive training. So if you're new to it, you are supported with that training. To date, we've had over 21,000 people sign up to join Cochrane Crowd and help us identify the studies that we need. And these contributors have come from 166 countries of the world. And so far, we've generated a whopping 5.3 million individual classifications on the data that people have been helping us to filter. Now, when the COVID pandemic struck, we experienced at first hand the corresponding infodemic. And within weeks, we were struggling to keep up with the volume of research being produced. And this in turn made it very difficult to identify the good information from the bad, or the less reliable information. And in part, as a response to this, we created a new task on Cochrane Crowd called COVID Quest. And so this task is specifically about helping to identify COVID-related studies. And we task our citizen scientists with identifying COVID-related studies and then describing their study design and their aim. And it's open to anyone. And there's a good training module to help you if you're new to this area, but also, as I've just described, we've got the micro training modules as well, which will be a really nice introduction to different study designs if it's something that you're new to. We also run weekly challenges in Cochrane Crowd. And so this is where we all get together at one point in the week for a sort of 3-hour period. You don't have to join for all 3 hours. You can just join for 5 minutes if that's all you can manage. And we work on the same task, helping to find studies related to COVID-19. And it's proved a really nice way to feel slightly more connected as a community during these really unsettling times. Though I didn't want to just make this all about Cochrane and Cochrane Crowd. So my last two slides are actually about two other initiatives that you might find useful or interesting. The first is a project run by an organisation called Evidence Synthesis Ireland, and the initiative is called iHealth Facts. And it enables the public to check the reliability of a health claim. So you simply submit a question, and then that question gets assigned to a member of their research team, and they then draft their answer based on the evidence that's available, based on that hierarchy of evidence that Richard was talking about earlier. And they share this then with another researcher who independently checks it, and then they post their answer up on the iHealth Facts website. And there have been lots of questions posted, and there are lots of answers, and they produce this sort of very nice, easy kind of infographic, very sort of simple format in terms of the answer. So it's really worth checking out if you've got some questions in your mind that you'd like to have checked, because either it's already been asked and there'll be an answer there already, or you can ask the question and it will be answered. And then another potentially useful resource to know about is the World Health Organization's Mythbusters site. It also covers a long list of COVID-19 myths that have circulated over the last 12 to 15 months. And it also is useful because it describes how misinformation can be reported. So if you come across examples of misinformation, then it's got a really useful guide on how you can actually flag that. So for example, how do I mark a Facebook post as fake news? So it's really, really useful and sort of hits home that, you know, we can all play a part in curbing the spread of misinformation. So that's the sort of us talking to you bit over. Move that over to the other side. I've just put up a list of some of the key URLs that we've talked about in this webinar, just in case you wanted to jot those down. But yes, I think that's probably enough of us just waffling away, and I think we have a bit of time for any questions that we might have.
Yeah, and we'll send these URLs out in the follow-up email, and I'm also going to make them available on that scistarter.org/NLM page. So stay tuned for that, everyone. And if you're watching on YouTube or on Zoom, go ahead and get your questions in. But I'll kick us off with one for you both. So I noticed in terms of who's turning in, there are people who work with students on the line. So I see a children's librarian, for example, as well as a K-12 educator. Do you have any advice for folks who might want to use these resources that you showcased today with students?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And actually, I meant to say, as I was talking through particularly the micro training modules, we have used them with young people before, some very similar micro training modules, and they've worked really nicely. We do have what we call a sister platform to Cochrane Crowd, which we call Classmate. And I will make sure, Caroline, that you have the URL so you can post that as well. But essentially, Classmate enables teachers to use the Cochrane Crowd learning activities and tasks for their students. So that would be one way in which a teacher, for example, might be able to get their students doing the micro training modules, and then they can monitor their activity and see how they're getting on with those. So yeah, I think they are by and large suitable for quite a young audience. And Richard, yeah.
Yeah, I've just shared a link as well, because there's an organisation called Students for Best Evidence, which is Cochrane linked as well, and that produces lots and lots of resources for people who work with students. I think not so much school students, but perhaps university students, maybe medical students, not exclusively medical students. So there's a website there as well that Cochrane has. Yeah, if you do that, please feel free to have a look at that site. There's loads of resources that are there for free.
Awesome. So my next question is, so for Citizen Science Month, we have a lot of people who are facilitators who tend to tune into these events. So they could be educators, like the audience you just addressed, librarians, or just people who run volunteer programs at community-based organizations. What advice would you give to folks who are trying to facilitate, Cochrane Crowd or other related activities in a group?
Well, I think the main advice that we give is we're here to help. If you want any help in coordinating a group activity using Cochrane materials or Cochrane tasks, so do get in touch at any point. The using Classmate is specifically kind of designed so that anyone can coordinate a group activity. So it's hopefully a really nice, simple setup wizard. If you're planning an activity that you want to go on for days, weeks, months, you know, because you can have any length of time you want really for a particular citizen science activity using the crowd activities. If it is for a reasonably long period of time, then we definitely advise that you do get in touch so that we can make sure that you're not going to run out of content, that you're not suddenly going to run out of records to screen or that kind of thing. So it's just about perhaps having a bit of a heads up and planning. I think an informal kind of piece of advice, if you're trying to facilitate a group doing a citizen science activity, is don't underestimate the power of good communication with your group. So just keep staying in touch, keep motivating with, how much progress has been achieved. And I think also just try to make it clear what the mission is and why you're all there collectively, trying to achieve something. What is it you're trying to achieve? And keeping that sort of at the forefront of your communications is good.
And it seems to be my role here to find websites to point you in the direction of while Anna is talking. So I've shared a link there to Cochrane's website, which is jam-packed with training resources beyond Anna's wonderful resources that she has
absolutely.
For the Cochrane crowd. So there's lots of resources on the training website there, many of which are free for people to access. You just need a Cochrane account, which is free to use, and you can find things like the evidence essentials, but lots more stuff as well on the training website. So if you are thinking about working with people, please do have a look there and see if there's anything that might draw your attention. Some people have been interested in using those evidence essentials workshops, online learning resources as part of a kind of a blended learning experience. I've personally done that with a group of citizens, healthcare consumers, and linked some workshops, face-to-face stuff with those online learning as well. We're writing that up presently, and that'll eventually find its way onto the training website as well, I'm sure.
Great, that's awesome. I also noticed, just looking at the chat, we have folks tuning in from Bangladesh, quite a few folks from the UK. We have someone tuning in from Nigeria. I was wondering if you could kind of speak toward the international community, if you have any success stories of, international collaboration with this work, or people in other countries.
It was certainly from the Cochrane crowd perspective, it's always been, really amazing to see that. I think over half of our contributors are from kind of non-UK, non-US countries. As I say, it's 166 countries that our contributors are from. And for many, when we run sort of motivation surveys sort of to see why people are joining Cochrane crowd, it's largely because they want a way to help to produce robust health evidence. And this is one way in which they can do that. This is one meaningful and flexible way in which they can contribute. So I think it's providing, an opportunity for some people at the right time and keeping it really flexible. We don't expect people to sign up and to stay committed for the rest of their lives. It might just be something that works for them at that point in their life where they want to gain a few more skills. They want to learn a little bit more about evidence-based medicine. And it's just part of their sort of pathway towards wherever they might be headed. And we do attract an awful lot of people who are interested in pursuing, a medical career or some sort of background in healthcare. But we also attract, people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of, cultures. And I think one thing to note is that the records we deal with are by and large in English. But over the next few years, we hope to start to assess more studies in different languages as well. So I think that'll be another big draw for people whose first language isn't English.
And again, I can do this thing again. I've just shared some links to Cochrane's geographic network in the chat, because as well as having a kind of a central organization for which Anna and I both work, there are groups, there's a network of organizations around the world of Cochrane organizations. I've shared it in the link so you can see, and I've also shared a map which shows you where they are. So some of those countries that you mentioned, Caroline, they have, there'll be a Cochrane representation in those countries. And then there are other wider networks as well. So there's a Cochrane Africa, there's a Cochrane Ibero-America, which covers a number. Both of those cover a number of different countries. So if you're interested in finding out more, you can pop along to that website and find out if there's a Cochrane representation in your area as well. And that does work in your own language if English isn't your first language. Yeah.
Great. Well, I know we're almost nearing the end of our time together, so I have one more question. So the number one thing people ask me at SciStarter is, what if I do something wrong? What if I miss something? Well,
Yeah.
just research. Will the project be over? What would you tell those people who might be nervous about that?
Well, yeah, I'd say it was a disaster. No, it's not. It's my number one question as well, although quite often from the researcher side is, how can you ensure the quality of citizen science output kind of thing? So the way in which it works in Cochrane Crowd is that we have what we call agreement algorithms in the background behind each task. So no one person's incorrect decision is going to mean that, that study disappears forever and we forget to, it doesn't get incorporated into a systematic review and the whole world comes to an end. It's really what we've done is build something that can cope with human error, because we were all beginners at some stage, and even those of us who are not beginners in this will still make mistakes from time to time. I am definitely quite error prone, so I need these agreement algorithms in the background. And essentially what that means is that no one record is seen by one person. It takes multiple classifications, and then the calculation works out, okay, we've had, for example, 4 consecutive agreeing classifications on this one record. They've all been made independently. We can feel 99% certain that that classification is correct, therefore, because it's been made 4 times independently in a row. And that's the kind of algorithm that we have at work that ensures, high quality collective output. And we evaluate that regularly to make sure that, we don't need to tweak things here and there, because occasionally we might do if we suddenly expand to a much larger, group of newcomers who are all learning the ropes. We might change things slightly so that we can accommodate that. But yeah, that's how we ensure quality. We do also make sure that our training and support materials are good. I hope they're not too long and boring, but they are designed to really teach you about the task at hand, and you get a chance to do some practice records and that kind of thing, and you get some feedback on that as well.
Great. Well, we have 1 minute left. So I wanted to ask you both, do you have any closing calls to action for us or anything you haven't mentioned yet that you want to make sure that people know?
No, I think just from me, it's been a real pleasure to do this. And I hope that, you know, if it sparks any kind of interest in what Cochrane does or what Cochrane Crowd does, then yeah, just dive on in and take a look, and feel free to get in touch and feedback any thoughts.
Yes, my final thing I would say is, I mean, earlier on there were, from the polls, you know, one of the things that people said was that, you know, they headed over to the internet to find information about their health condition. It's really hard to find trusted information, I think. And now I would say this, wouldn't I, because I work for Cochrane, but Cochrane is trusted information. It's the gold standard of evidence. We don't take any money from pharma or any other vested interests. So if you're looking for information, then the thing I would say is, you know, why not sign up, join Cochrane? It's free, no obligations, and it's a source of really useful information, high quality, trusted information about health. So that's what I would say. Just go along and join Cochrane and get our regular newsletters. Awesome.
That's a great call to action. So everybody join Cochrane, get involved with Cochrane Crowd, and also visit scistarter.org/NLM to learn more about the All of Us research program, which supported us throughout Sci Month and during this program, and other citizen science opportunities through SciStarter. Thanks again to you both. I really enjoyed learning with all of our attendees this morning, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.